joining today's webinar. My name is Valia Dracu. I'm part of the Geography Department of Haracopia University in Athens, in Greece. And we are organizing as part of the cluster of transformative change projects on biodiversity, a series of webinars. This is the second webinar that we are hosting here today, together with our colleagues from White Research, Danaya Donaki and Ioanna Nidrioti. So today's webinar is, as the whole series of webinars is actually supported by the Ecosystem Services Partnership, ESP. And for that reason, we have like a first introductory words presenting the network of ESP. And I will give the floor to Luis Nostroza in a couple of minutes to tell us a few words about it. Just to let you know that today's webinar is going to be recorded. So if you have any objections related to that, please let us know. This second round of webinars is really targeting on the core of our work in terms of the methods that we use to map system interactions in order to understand what are the ways to identify pathways for transformative change for biodiversity. The 7 Horizon Europe projects which relate and help co-organize this series of webinars is CircHive, BIOTRAILS, TC4B, Planet4B, Selena, MOSAIC, and BIONEXT. And in each series of webinars, some of these are going to be presenting parts of their work. I don't want to delay this further, so just a few rules of how this will be done. We will have 5 presentations from different projects related to the methods that we have been using. And after each presentation, we have reserved 5 minutes time for Q&A, questions and short answers. All questions will be written on the online chat. And I will be facilitating this webinar. Thank you all in advance for your participation, and we look forward to fruitful discussions. So without further delay, I give the floor to Luis Nostroza, who will introduce you to the Ecosystem Services Partnership Network. And Luis, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Valia, and organizers for organizing this very interesting webinar. Super happy to see you, even if it's on the screen. My pleasure to be here introducing the webinar. Thank you very much for the invitation, and as I'm saying, for organizing. My name is Luis Nostroza, and I'm the leader of the Task Force on Education and Training at the Ecosystem Services Partnership. And for those of you that do not know our network, would like to give just some few hints about that as an introductory word for this webinar. Don't know if I don't have control actually over the slides, so maybe we can just move to the second. So the Ecosystem Services Partnership is basically a worldwide network that has the aim to enhance the science, policy, and practice of what we call ecosystem services science, with the aim to enhance sustainable development and nature's conservation. We are organizing basically conferences since 2008, the first workshop. So we have been for a while already strengthening this space for scientific production. Maybe you can move to the next one. So who we are basically, as I said, we are a network organized in a way of working groups. We have a structure divided in thematic groups. We have more than 20 thematic groups where you can find probably the topic you are interested in research is going to be probably listed there. We have also biome groups, that is basically reflecting different ecosystems. We have marine ecosystems, we have urban ecosystems, we have 10 biome groups, and also we have sectoral groups that they reflect normally the typical structure of governments and universities. So let's say we have agriculture, we have forest, etc. We have 10 sectoral groups. These groups are very active, so if you want to participate, you are cordially invited to go to the webpage of the Ecosystem Services Partnership. You can find there the lead person, contact, and get in to know what those groups are doing, what activities are they organizing, etc. We have also regional chapters that are following the structure of the UN in terms of regions, North America, South America, etc., etc., and also national networks. Probably your country has a national network. You can also find that information on our website. And if not, the invitation would be, of course, so why not to try to set up your national network on your country. Basically, the network is focusing around this science policy interface. So we articulate scientific knowledge with practitioners through several different activities. As I mentioned, we organize education and training. We have networks. We have also guidelines. All that information you can find in our website. You can maybe move to the next one, please. Yeah. So, for instance, we have a very active group attending the IPBES meetings. If you're interested also to join us on that realm, you can contact us and said that you are interested in to be part of our delegation. We are going to the IPBES meetings and basically following to what extent the agenda of IPBES is recognizing what I said, it is our core interest, basically the strengthening of ecosystem services science. The same with the COP. We have started just last year. We attended the last COP in Colombia. We have a delegation of more than 50 persons. And we are also very much interested to follow as a stakeholder the activities of the COP to be sure that ecosystem services science is well reflected there. I mentioned already about the ESP task force. If you have an idea for a training or a workshop, you can get in contact with us. Super happy to support all those initiatives. And maybe an announcement, the next conference this year from 23 to 27 of June is going to be in Darwin. This is the the global conference that we organize every 3 years. There is the link. Maybe organizers are going to send them later the presentation so you can have all this information on your desktop. And the last one, I think, is just some pictures to show you how alive and how vital is this network that those of you that have participated maybe share with me that basically we have a very interesting and very appealing spirit that comes along in conferences and the meetings when we see in person each other and we share our passion for nature. That's all from my side. Thank you very much. There's some contact details. You can follow us also on Twitter, on typical networks. Also, then my contact details in case you have further questions. So with that, I just give back the floor to Valia. Thank you very much for organizing this interesting meeting and looking forward to listen to the presenters. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Luis, for this very nice introduction to the Ecosystem Services Partnership. Please, participants, feel free to join the network. As Luis said, it's very inspiring and supportive for all your current and future endeavors. So we are already a bit behind schedule because we had some technical challenges in the beginning, so I will not delay this further. I will directly give the floor to Ira Bataray from the CircHive project, who will present us the first set of methods relating to landscape approaches and biodiversity footprint assessment. You have 15 minutes, and then any kind of questions, please feel free to add them in the chat, and we will address them in the follow-up discussion. Ira, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Valia. Hi, I'm Ira Bataray. I'm a researcher in Natural Resources Institute, Finland, and a researcher and deputy coordinator of CircHive, the Horizon project, which I'll be presenting what we have done during the last few years, mainly based on the methodologies for biodiversity footprint assessment. So the main idea with CircHive is to kind of put the focus on biodiversity footprinting with a life cycle assessment and natural capital accounting, and also input-output modeling. We have several case study partners in different fields or sectors, from agriculture to biomaterials, retailers, investors, and cities. And we are working together with each of these case study partners, applying different kind of methodologies under natural capital accounting and life cycle assessment. And we do have a goal to create a network of different kind of companies and cities all together who would be very interested to take the first steps towards this kind of footprinting approach, and we help them out as well. So first, the concepts. The biodiversity footprinting, it's usually how we measure the impact of what we produce as a company and as a community on biodiversity, and based on the production and consumption of various goods and services, and can be both positive and negative. And so far, there has not been any particular methods or guidance that has been established or well used or standardized for this kind of approach. So now we are, through this project, kind of hovering around different kind of approaches that would work better in different fields and sectors. And in the end, we will provide a guidance based on our piloting work that we do. So the first approach that we are trying is life cycle assessment, where we evaluate the environmental aspect of different products and services through different kind of stages of, and these focus on different kind of impact drivers, for example, like land use, climate change, pollution, overexploitation, and so on. And we measure or we kind of assess the impact towards biodiversity. And the input output, this is more like an economic version of LCA, let's say, and more like aggregated version. And it refers to where we do a bit more like a sector-wise, industry-wise, and a country-wise kind of assessment, and provides a big overview of what kind of economic flows are there between these different sectors and regions and in the country. The natural capital accounting part is the other end of the value chain. In natural capital accounting, we collect all different, it's more like a collection and compiling of different kind of data. It can be data related to natural capital flows and services, and it can be both physical and monetary terms. For natural capital assessment, we usually go through the spatial scale measurement and very much work with the spatial scale data. And the business is we determine what kind of methods would be the right one for different kind of businesses, and we basically consider the ecosystem extent and ecosystem condition of natural capital accounting. So extent is like the measurement of what area is being used, and condition is like similar to impact drivers that we have in life cycle assessment. It has different kind of categories of these impacts and indicators, and we assess those to measure the impacts on biodiversity. It includes both impacts and dependencies under natural capital accounting. So, for example, with natural capital accounting, it could mean that we could measure a company's like dependencies or impacts towards nature, like what are they using and what are the impacts towards nature. And same, for example, for if it's for ecosystem level, there could be like evaluation of ecosystem assets and the extent and condition of those assets. And there also is a bit of integration of accounting approach where we calculate the net impact of biodiversity on that particular selected sites. Next slide, please. So more of an overview, what we had done. This is, we had published a deliverable where we have included all the methods that we have assessed or more like overviewed, like from different perspectives of natural capital accounting and life cycle assessment that we thought would be have somehow touched the concept of biodiversity and biodiversity footprinting approach. And the deliverable could be found in our website, and I think I have put it in the end of our this presentation, the website where you can find the deliverable. So, and I'm going to summarize what we had found during our activities for this work in last 2 years. So we were able to identify different kind of trends in business environments regarding different kind of policies and what kind of new reporting initiatives have been coming up in the field of natural capital accounting and biodiversity footprinting. The first problem we recognized was the inconsistency with the terms and definitions of different concepts related to these biodiversity footprinting tools and indicators and metrics. All these different terms were quite differently defined in different kind of methods. So we tried to align them together and have like one definition for each. And the onion diagram that you see in this slide is what we came up with after reviewing all those definitions available and having one definitions for each category in our project. So next slide, please. So during the process, so the first thing we started with is the method mapping for the methodology section. So we went through all the life cycle assessment, natural capital accounting, and input-output methods that's available so far and has been used for biodiversity assessment. And the methods we tried to classify into different categories. So as you can see, I don't know if this is quite visible, but in the table you can see that we have categorized these into different kind of categories so that it's easier to evaluate the level of those methods or the how extensive those methods are. In total, we have 45 methods that we were able to recognize so far during our review process, out of which 10 were natural capital accounting, 30 were life cycle assessment methods, and 5 input-output. These were all screened and categorized based on whether they cover performance assessment or risk assessment, whether they were related to dependency, impact, or impact drivers, and again, also with the scope of the study and what kind of output we get when we use those methods. Next slide, please. Then, because we are working with a lot of business organizations as our case study partners or pilot cases, so we try to screen all the methods identified based on different categories or based on the scope of application of those methods. So we had 45 methods and we divided them into product and service, site or project or value chain level, or supply chain, or was it like very extensive towards the country? So we try to identify what kind of methods work with what kind of scope level so that it's easier for the businesses to review the method and refine and select accordingly. Next, please. We also were able to kind of do more like a SWOT analysis of the methods identified. And in this SWOT analysis, we had there will be more information, of course, in the deliverable that we have published already, but this is just a small part from there. So we try to evaluate how natural capital accounting, what kind of perspective natural capital accounting covers, and what is the strength of that method, and same with life cycle assessment and input-output modeling. And here I have kind of picked opportunities and weakness weakness, because these were the most interesting ones so far from the piloting perspective. So from the natural capital accounting, it was actually the coverage of the method from the biodiversity species level or the extent of the biodiversity. The coverage level was quite good. It's like provides an overview, and from the life cycle assessment part, it provides more like a specific hotspots or impacts. So this kind of provides a very holistic view towards biodiversity footprinting and input output. Like I already said, it's more over focused on the economic side. So if you want to have like more aggregated version, but on the business level from the money perspective, then input output is the more like aggregated version of that. And again, the weakness, it's the aggregation for input output, and for LCA, the LCA methods are not so well covered for all biodiversity indicators. So current methods are quite much focused on land use and land use change, but they're developing, of course. And with the natural capital accounting part, it's again due to its scope of assessment, it is a bit difficult to apply if you want to do it like on a smaller scale, like product or value chain. Next, please. Yeah, so sorry for the bad quality, but this framework, this is something that we try to kind of integrate together all the aspects that we found throughout the studies. And here we started with data work, where we analyze what kind of data is available already, what is being used in these kind of assessments, and what are the sources. Are there like freely available sources? Are they enough? And those kind of assessments are covered. And then we move on towards a method where we assess all different kind of methods, like I mentioned, LCA, natural capital accounting, and input-output methods, and we assess what kind of needs those methods have, and based on what those methods are to be assessed, and is the data availability enough, and what more is needed is assessed there. And we also try to look together life cycle assessment, input output, and natural capital accounting approach, if this would be the overall holistic biodiversity footprint assessment method, if we try to put them together methodologically. And on the decision-making side, we try to evaluate the risk and opportunities based on the results of these methods used. We try to prioritize what are the pressures and impacts and what part of the value chain or the system we need to focus on. And then based on those priorities, move further with risk assessments and impact assessments, and develop different strategies and provide guidance for businesses in sustainable business model development. Yeah. Yes. So this was something I mentioned very briefly in the beginning of the presentation. So we have this big group of different kind of organizations. It's still open. It's called Beehive. The idea with this group is that we have all the interested organizations who want to join and participate in this approach. So the idea would be we would share all the info, webinars, or some kind of information session or capacity building sessions that we organize within the project will be communicated with this group, and they are able to come and listen to our these kind of events and webinars that we organize. And also there would be different kind of workshops organized, and it is possible for these group within this Beehive to participate and learn more and understand more with these all different initiatives on reporting and these methods being developed, and the biodiversity concept in general as well. So if there is someone you think would be the right one or would need this kind of approach, then please let us know or ask them to join this group. Yeah, thank you. And if there is any question, please let me know.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Ira. Just to mention that on the chat, there are some useful links that are linked to this project related to the biodiversity footprint work that has been done. And thank you so much for sharing. I see you get a lot of uploading, but I don't see any questions on the chat. A very quick question from my side before moving on to the next speaker. So in terms of this method overview that you have generated, what if you could say what would be, let's say, the most, based on the work that you have done, the most efficient when talking to stakeholders in terms of types of outputs? Have you dealt with this approach? Have you tried to figure this out?
Now we are actually running our pilots with our case study partners, and now we have picked out what we thought were the most efficient in our point of view, like which has more coverage from the biodiversity perspective. And they're still running, but by the end of spring, we will have the results from all our pilots, at least by summer. And then we will have like a more stronger opinions on what method works best for what kind of work and sectors. But that's going on at the moment.
Fantastic. We're looking forward to these then.
Yeah, sure.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
So I will then move on to our second presentation for today's webinar from Alexandra Ioannou from the BIONEXT project, who will talk to us about their work on participatory system dynamics modeling. So Alexandra, I don't know, I don't see her.
Hello.
Hi, okay, great. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Valia. Would like to thank all the organizers for this great webinar and for inviting me to present here. And so I'm going to present you our model developed in the framework of BIONEXT project, the Juniper model. And let's go to the next, please, slide. So the BIONEXT project, with the full name, the Biodiversity Nexus Transformative Change for Sustainability. BIONEXT started in 2022 and will end in 2026. 10 partners are involved in this project and from 8 different countries, and the project is funded with 4.1 million euros. BIONEXT is developing an innovative nexus modeling framework that captures and simulates the interlinkages between biodiversity, climate change, food, water, energy, transport, and human health. As a base for the framework, BIONEXT is building on 3 existing modeling approaches: a regional integrated model, an agent-based model, and a system dynamics model, the one that I'm going to present you today, the Juniper model. Next slide, please. So, Juniper is a system dynamics model developed in the Stella Architect simulation environment and maps spatial and statistical data coming from large databases for the 27 European countries, plus more 3 countries, Norway, Switzerland, and the United Kingdom, viewed as a single entity. From now on, we call it the EU level for short. Also, we developed 6 more Juniper models for 6 single countries: Greece, Finland, Spain, Czech Republic, Poland, and the United Kingdom. The input for each these model are annual time series from 2000 to 2019, and this is the baseline scenario. As a next step, the Juniper models run different scenario policies with the aim to help policymakers and stakeholders to unveil a package of policy initiatives, and in that way to set the EU on the path to a green transition. Next, please. So let's take an overview of the model. Imagine that the Juniper model is built in some levels. In the upper level, we can see here, these are the modules representing each of these 30 countries I said before. And if, for example, we click on one country, here, for example, please continue, we can go to the here, yes, thank you, to the next level where we can see all the sectors, the modules of Nexus: water, energy, food, transport, human health, biodiversity, and emissions. So now if we click on each one of these sectors, we can go deeper. The first one is the water module. Here we have all the water uses. The main output is the total water withdrawal, coming from the agricultural water withdrawal, the industrial, the domestic, the water needed in energy sector, the desalinated water, and also here we calculate the water exploitation index, which is a water scarcity indicator. If we click to the next slide on energy module, here we can see all the energy of each country or in the European level by source and by sector. We have by source the fossil fuels in detail, coal, oil, and the gas. We have all the renewables, and down we can see in the sectors here that we have all the uses by sector. We have in the electricity, industry, in the households, in the agriculture, commercial, public, and all with correspondence to all fuel types. Also here we estimate the energy-related emissions. If we go to the next slide, we have the food module, where here we have also in detail all the production of food, the meat, the poultry, we have animal products, we have all crops in detail. We have fish, and here in the yellow one, we can see that also we have the agricultural land that is divided in pasture land and cropland, and also in agricultural irrigated and non-irrigated land. And also here we estimate the emissions from the agricultural sectors and the energy needed in this sector. In the next slide, we can see the transport module. Here we have all the movements in road coming from cars, lorries, and public transportation for conventional and electric. We have aviation moves, we have rail moves, and also we have in detail all some GHG emissions, CO2, PM 2.5, NOxes and SOxes. So we have air transport, and also we have also calculated here the energy needed in the transport module. In the next one, we have the human health module. The main outcome is the health outcome coming from the length of life and the quality of life. And all these are calculated and affected from all the threats coming from the other sectors. Also, in the next slide, we have the biodiversity module, where here we estimate the red list index and the red list of ecosystem index. These two are tools to assess the threat of the species of each country coming from the other modules, and also the conservation status of ecosystems. Next, please. So this is the baseline scenario as the Juniper is developed. As the next step, we implemented the shared socioeconomic pathways and representative concentration pathways up to 2100. We have 4 combination scenarios here in detail, but I would like to skip it to save some time and go to the results. Here are the parameters changed per SSP, and so we forced the model to apply these changes. And in the next slide, we can see the results. Here, if you see this table, in the first column, we have the first combination, SSP1 and RCP 2.6. Here we can see that health, human health, and biodiversity are positively affected and that is the life expectancy and the red list index that we calculated. In the agricultural sector, the food production is reduced due to dietary shift, and this is why because we have a very big decrease in animal consumption, in meat consumption, beef, lamb, and chicken, pork. Also in the water sector, we have the water exploitation index and the total water withdrawal that are reduced, and this is due to the enhanced irrigation and technological efficiency, and also to behavioral change in water savings. In the energy sector, we have a big increase in oil price as an SSP, as a scenario, so that causes a decrease in fossil fuels. And in turn, a significant decline in CO2 emissions. This is the best scenario of the four. Let's go to the next, please. This is the next combination. Here we can see that health and biodiversity are negatively affected because we have a an increase in meat production and also in temperature change and transport emission. In the food sector, we see that food production decreases because we have an increase in meat consumption and a big reduction in crop consumption. In the water sector, the water exploitation index and the total water withdrawal is increased because we have a decrease in irrigation efficiency and increase in industrial water use and increase in GDP. In the energy sector, the same as previously, because we have a big increase in oil price, we see that we have a decrease in fossil fuels. The next, please. The third selected scenarios combination, we have that health and biodiversity are also negatively affected due to the dietary shift, climate change, the global warming, and also due to agricultural and transportation emissions. In the water sector, we have a slightly increase due to the agricultural water decrease, and this is also because of the enhanced irrigation efficiency. The same is with the energy sector as the previous two. In the food production, we have total food production and CO2 emissions from agriculture that increases due to the increased turn in chicken, pork, and crop consumption, and that is due to the change in agricultural yields factor. And the last scenario combination, we have increased population, and that causes a reduction in the green space per inhabitant, and that in turn affects negatively the overall human health and biodiversity. In the agricultural sector, we have an increase in the food consumption, and that causes a big increase in agricultural CO2 emissions. In the water sector, the water exploitation index and the total water and the agricultural are all slightly increased. And lastly, the energy-related emissions are in high levels here. It's the worst scenario of all, reaching 3 gigatons per year. So to sum up, in order to succeed in reaching carbon neutrality and also to have environmental sustainability, we have to face all the problem holistically. That's what Nexus does. And that means after studying all the results that we have to stop burning fossil fuels and turn to renewables, we have to consume less meat, and so we have less GHG emissions from agriculture. We have to increase the efficiency in technological uses in water sector and in agriculture, and also in the transportation sector. We must use less vehicles, and in turn, we can do more cycling or walking. And so by that, I believe we can have better results overall. Thank you very much. Thanks for your attention.
Thank you very much, Joanna. Sorry, Alexandra.
Okay, it's okay. Everyone is confused.
Sorry. Okay, so this is actually very, very interesting. I don't see any questions on the chat. So I have one question. Well, I have many, but because this is also very close to what we are also doing. I see a hand that has been raised by Anna. I'm not sure if we can have. Yeah.
If I may, I just have a general question.
Yeah.
How this Juniper model is related to the Crafty model? Because in MOSAIC, the KIT, I saw that KIT team is also in this project. And I was just wondering if you could explain to a non-modeler the relationship between the Juniper model and the Crafty land use model.
Okay, I'm not an expert in the Crafty. There are other colleagues, but I can say that the Crafty and the IAP model and Juniper are all collaborating and act in the same way to find the best solution. So we all act in collaboration with the other two models.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Great. Thank you so much, Alexandra. There is also one comment on the chat about whether this is already published. I don't know.
Not yet, but I hope very soon.
Okay. Good luck with that.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Great. So thank you. And we will now move to the next speaker, who is Raffaele Giordano from the BIOTRAILS project. So Raffaele will also stay within the same similar methodology and the Participatory System Dynamics Modelling approach. And Raffaele, the floor is yours.
Yeah, I will see. Okay, now I see myself. Hi, good morning. I'm Raffaele Giordano. I'm coordinating BIOTRAILS project, but beside that, I'm also a researcher at the Water Research Institute of the Italian National Research Council. And my main activities are related to the engagement of stakeholders in developing a system dynamic model for different reasons. In this speech, I will present our preliminary result, the activities and the preliminary results of the PSDM approach implementation to map and manage the biodiversity, climate, and society nexus. Next one. This is just a brief overview of the content, but basically we will move from the theoretical description of what a nexus is toward the implementation of the our methodological approach in one of the value chains that are the core of the BIOTRAILS, that is the gold mining value chain in Ghana. Next one, please. So as we already heard from the previous presentation, the Nexus has been introduced like an holistic approach to overcome some of the limits that characterize the integrated approach, where we have one resources that need to be integrated with the others. Here we have different sectors characterized by multiple and non-linear interconnection. Among the different nexus that are mentioned in the scientific literature, we focus on the biodiversity, climate, and society nexus, which has been introduced by IPBES report. And here in this slide, you can see some of the examples, simple example of how the interaction among these sectors could emphasize negative synergies, leading toward an even increasing negative impact. Next one. What really interests us, and this is the core of our approach in BIOTRAILS, is not only to map and analyze the nexus, but also to support the decision makers, the policy makers, in designing nexus policies. For us, nexus policies are those policies intervention that could be capable to activate synergies among the different sectors, leading toward co-beneficial impact of policies, and try to reduce or avoid the potential trade-off among sectors that could lead to co-detrimental impact, policy impact. Next one. And to do this, this is the main, the core of our approach. We adopted a transdisciplinary approach, which is mainly based on the co-creation of knowledge. So not only integration with the knowledge, but co-construct knowledge involving stakeholders, scientists, policymakers, decision makers, and other actors in the value chain, whose main scope of this transdisciplinary approach in our project was to support the co-design of nexus policies. Next one, please. It was not my battery. Sorry. This is the overview of the different methodological steps. I don't know if it's clear enough, but basically we start from the conceptualization of the systems. All the steps have been done together with the stakeholders and the policymakers. So we started from the conceptualization of the system and the definition of the system boundaries. Then we moved to the nexus system mapping and behavioral analysis, and the final steps is related to the system simulation. It's important for me to highlight that the first three steps are mainly related to a qualitative system thinking approach, whereas the third one is more related to a quantitative system thinking approach. Next one, please. So let's move to the practical implementation. So these are some pictures taken during the first stakeholders workshop in Ghana. Basically, we invited different members of the value chain, from producer to sellers to people of the local community, members of the local communities, and we asked them to next one, please. Yeah, sorry, I put a lot of animation. Sorry for this. Next one, sorry, not this one. We asked the people to, no, sorry, can you get back? Yeah, thanks. We asked the participant to use cards representing the main elements of the value chain the biodiversity, climate, and society nexus, to locate those elements on the map and to connect using causal connection. Next one, please. So what we did after the workshop is to structure the results of the stakeholders' discussion into a causal loop diagram. The causal loop diagram is basically a graph representing the causal connection among the different variables. The red arrows represent negative links. The blue ones represent positive links. And you can also see all the elements that were discussed by the stakeholders during the workshop. Next one, please. Well, but this was just a graph. What we did is to analyze the complexity of the nexus map in order to find out what we call the nexus challenges. So they are the elements that, according to the stakeholders' perception, are somehow hampering the creation of the enabling of the synergies among different sectors. And for doing this, basically, we implemented graph theory measure in order to identify the most central elements that can act either as a bridge between sectors, but also as a bottlenecks toward the transformative change. Here you have, just an example. Next one. And we also extrapolate those elements in order to understand what are the main causes and effects related to the potential change, dynamic evolution of this variable. Next one, please. So this is the first part of our approach, which was related to the qualitative system dynamic model, which is great because it's simple, it's intuitive, so it's really simple to be used and effective to be used during the discussion with the stakeholders. However, there are some limits. The causal loop diagrams does not account for the time dimension. So we cannot simulate the scenario, the dynamic evolution of each variable. We can make some dynamic analysis, but it's pretty difficult to the time evolution of the policy intervention impacts. So these limits, it could reduce the effectiveness of the causal loop diagrams in supporting the policy design. So we decided to enable a transition from the causal loop diagram toward the stock and flow diagram, similar to what the previous speech was presenting, whose main scope is to support us in simulating different what-if scenarios. Next one, please. And this is our model. It's great. It's quite complicated. I know that I have to use submodels because it could make the structure a bit more clear, but this is the draft because we are still working on it. Our project will finish by the end of this year, so we have still some months ahead of us. But basically, this is the translation into a quantitative model of what has been done from the qualitative point of view together with the stakeholders using the causal loop diagrams. Next one, please. And this is how we are going to use the stock and flow diagram to support the design of Nexus policies. So the first thing will be to support the identification of the leverage points and analysis. I'm saying support because there is another task in our work package that is addressing the same issue from a different perspective. So basically, the idea is to combine these two approaches and to compare the results of these two approaches in terms of leverage point detection analysis. And then we are going to use that model to simulate, together with stakeholders, to simulate what-if scenario, so what happened in the system if we introduce specific intervention policies, and to identify trade-off and synergies, and use an optimization algorithm for identifying the most suitable combination of policies. Next one, please. In order to identify the leverage point, we are using the loop-that matter method, which has been published and introduced by Schoenberg, sorry if I pronounce it not correctly, in 2002. And basically, the main scope of this analysis is to detect the dominant loops, means those that have a strong impact on the challenges, to track this contribution over time. So it's not only a picture of the impact of each loops, but it's also capable to account for the dynamic evolution of this impact, and to identify potential weakness in the system where we need to intervene in order to support the sustainable management of Nexus. Next one, please. So this is a screenshot of the what the loop-that matter method in Stella software. Sorry, I forgot to mention this. Look like. So basically here you have some loops that have been highlighted by the software. Again, the red one are negative and the blue one are the positive. And this picture allow us to identify what are, among the, that complex system, the complex model that I showed you before, what are the loops that could really affect the dynamic evolution of the system. Next one, please. So if we zoom on one of the key challenges that was mentioned by the stakeholder here, the forested areas, so we can identify what are the loops that need to be accounted for in order to identify potential policy interventions. Next one, please. And then what we can do, what we are going to do now, what we are doing now, we are isolating the variable that are connected with these key challenges. And here on the right side of this slide, you can see the dynamic evolution of the impact of each link on the dynamic evolution of this part of the model. And we can easily see that, for example, that a key element that is affecting the deforestation process is related to the awareness, because of course but not only awareness of the deforestation per se, but also awareness of the potential impact, for example, on community well-being and health, that could lead member of the local community toward the adoption of unsustainable behavior, like, for example, the initiating any illegal mining activities or prefer illegal mining activities. Just a brief example, but we are still working on it. Next one, please. So concluding, well, I try to summarize. I try to summarize in this slide what are the pros and cons of our approach, and as a kind of lesson learned during our exercise. So one of the key pros is that in our experience, the participatory system dynamic model can be really used for as a transdisciplinary tool. Next one, please. Here, for example, you can see how the results of the structural equation model that Varia is going to present in a couple of minutes have been integrated in the model. So one of the key elements that, according to their analysis, could affect the adoption of sustainable behavior is the education and training. So we included this variable into the model, and we combine this variable. We model the impact of this variable to the intent to comply of for the pollution reduction regulation approach. So the system dynamic model, as we develop together with stakeholders, could be really used for supporting the adoption of transdisciplinary approach. Next one, please. PSDM can be used to simulate the dynamic evolution of different variables and to compare different intervention scenarios. Next one, please. So this is just an example of, I just try to play with the model and try to change some of the parameters that affect, that could represent the policies. And here you can have two potential dynamic evolution of the forested areas. This is important. Compared to the model that was presented before, our model is a semi-quantitative one. So we have some variables that are quantitative, some that are qualitative. Here, for example, just for this example, we assume that the deforestation process could be expressed in percentage. So that's why you have 100. Next one, please. And again, as I showed you before, concerning the leverage point analysis and the identification of potential point of intervention in the system, the PSDM allow us to account for the dynamic evolution over time of the different variables, so we can follow the impact of the different policies, and also potentially identify windows of opportunity in the future where new policies need to be implemented in order to support the achievement of the goals. Next one, please. But of course, we have also cons. And this is those cons are specifically related to the transition from the qualitative to the quantitative system dynamic model. As we see, the stock and flow diagram is quite complex, so it's pretty difficult to use it for supporting a discussion with the stakeholders. So our idea is to develop a user interface. But even in this case, we have the perception that the model could be considered could be perceived as a kind of black box. And since our approach is mainly related to enable the stakeholders' engagement and to enhance the stakeholders' acceptance toward the model and the results of the model, this could be a barrier. The validation of the quantitative system dynamic models require not only the data but also the stakeholders' knowledge, because we adopted an epistemological approach in the system mapping. So we didn't want to define the model as the system as it is, but as it is perceived by the different stakeholders. So that's why we really need to integrate data and stakeholders' knowledge into the validation, which could lead to some drawbacks. And finally, of course, the causal diagram could contain a lot of variables because it's qualitative. But when you have to quantify those variables, it's automatic, let's say, that some of the variable will be deleted because you don't have data, because you don't have equation, you are not capable to quantify this. So the final model, the quantitative model, could end up to be quite different from the one that we developed with the stakeholders. And this could be, again, a barrier, because the simplification that is required for developing the system dynamic model could lead to some misunderstanding with the stakeholders. I think that this is the last one. Next one, please. Okay, thanks. I don't know if I was on time.
Yes, Raffaele, that's good. Thank you. Thanks so much. You got also uploads, I see. So there are a few points in the chat. Also, just to mention that there are also references to comments to the previous speaker. So we will record everything and share it afterwards. There's a question which I think you slightly answered related to what platform. I think you said you use Stella for the modeling process,
Stella
right?
Stella for the stock and flow diagram, Kumu for the causal loop diagram.
Okay, and the question is, would the loop diagrams be available and transferable to other projects? I guess, how would the transferability of this work be possible?
Transferability is mainly related to the guidelines for the different methodological steps, because as I said, the model that we develop are really case specific, because they are based on the knowledge that we collect during the stakeholders engagement process. But we are now developing specific guidelines, which is one of the last deliverable that we are supposed to deliver. So the guidelines can be used for replicate our experience in other projects or in other cases.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you so much. So we will move on to the next presentation, which is by me. That always feels weird to present yourself. So I will talk to you. I will continue on the story of the BIOTRAILS project and talk to you about the work that we've been doing within our team in the Geography Department of Charkovi University, together with my colleague Haris Halkiadakis. On the development of structural equation models as a tool to really understand what are the societal motives to really move on to a sustainable behavior in favor of biodiversity. Next. So how do we identify this sustainable behavior adoption through the transformative change? We really follow the IPBES approach, and we really work on the hypothesis that in order to really accelerate this transformative change that has been highlighted as a need to occur in favor of biodiversity, we need to shift dominant societal views and transform them and values, along with transforming our narrative and the social norms around the patterns of production and consumption. Next slide, please. So for the BIOTRAILS work, we have been working on the theory of plant behavior as our conceptual basis for structuring our work and developing our hypotheses. And this is not a new theory. It's something that we have been working on for decades now. And it's also based on the initial theory of reasoned action, which practically all it tells us is that for a behavior to happen or a behavior to change, the first thing that we need to be sure is that there is an intention from individuals to do this change. And how can we really discover if the intention is there? We can discover it through three core parameters: someone's attitude towards a behavior, whether we think that a behavior is positive or negative towards biodiversity in our case, the norms, the subjective norms that we as societal members have, in which we understand how we perceive the social pressure to perform pro or contra biodiversity, and the perceived behavior control, which really tries to define what are the perceived obstacles or facilitators for us to really perform a new behavior. Next slide. So based on these as our theoretical basis, we really try to understand what are the core determinants of behavioral change that allow us to identify where transformation could tentatively happen. Next slide. And to do that, our main tool, which is really the core of this presentation, is the statistical approach of the structural equation models. Next I have also some animations. So within the BIOTRAILS project, I will not repeat what Rafaela said. We have been applying this into 4 different case studies. Cocoa produced by Peru and distributed across the globe. Arts and crafts from non-timber forest goods from Brazil. Fisheries and aquaculture from Greece to the Mediterranean basin. And gold mine in Ghana, which is also the example that Rafaela showed, and distributed outside the country. We applied our models to all case studies, but we will mostly give some examples from the aquaculture and the gold mining examples to avoid taking too much time. Practically, in terms of the method that we applied, structural equation models are really models that infer causality. They try to discover causal relationships among variables. It's a social science-based approach. It's mostly used there, but the last years it has been really gaining ground also with ecological and sociological studies. It's a method which really is used to test hypotheses, and when we talk about hypotheses, we talk about hypotheses about how linkages among these variables really happen and whether they're positive or negative. Next slide, please. So practically what SEMs do, they allow us to explore in the way they have been used also the last years. They allow us to explore perceptions of concepts which are broad in terms of like climate change or transformative change. And for those, we don't really have yet direct measurements. So we try to approach them from a more qualitative or semi-quantitative, as Rafaela would put it, approach. And so we really have statistical methods which allow us to really unravel relationships and connections among variables. And we have several statistical methods within the structural equation model, like confirmatory factor analysis, which really what allows us to do is to generate new variables, hidden variables, which try to describe these concepts like attitude, subjective norms, perceived behavior control. And these are not measured directly. And so therefore, they're not part of our originally collected data. So we try to infer these based on variables that we can collect and use them to indicate cause-effect relationships. Structural equation models, they have a structural model, a path analysis, which allows us to test the linkages among variables and the dependencies. And they have also a measurement model, which is really the semi-quantitative one, which allows us to test the statistical relationships and inferences. Next slide. So practically within BIOTRAILS, our core question is what really drives people's behavioral change towards a positive attitude for the environment. To do this, we collected data through a series of steps, starting from face-to-face interviews with selected stakeholders, which allowed us really to develop our first generic approach. Then workshops like the one that Rafaela presented from Ghana, surveys with stakeholders, which allow us to distribute them further and increase the sample size of our data. And we did them for all the 4 case studies with which the BIOTRAILS project is dealing. Based on these, we constructed variables. We developed questions which allowed us to capture components of attitude, components of subjective norms, and perceived behavior control. And with the modeling approach, we tried to construct these variables from originally collected information through these interviews, workshops, and surveys that I just mentioned. Based on the modeling approach, what we could then extract through a series of processing and analysis and fit indices and validation tests, we try to identify the final determinants of people's behavior. Next slide, please. Also, I just want to mention that when we talk about people within these 4 case studies, we really tried to capture perceptions of participants across all the steps of the supply chain of the products that we are dealing with. So we did not only target producers, we tried to understand how things change across the distribution of the supply chain, but also all the way up to the retailing part. The consumer side is something that is not dealt with in this method. Probably in a coming webinar, we will have something about that as well. So practically, our steps really focus on identifying variables based on a series of questions which allows us to construct them. Variables are scored in a scoring sheet from 1 to 5 based on how people give weight and importance to them. And based on the statistical method of the structural equation model, we develop the dependencies among the variables. The final, let's say, outcome of this is that we have a core set of variables which we know within each case study that can reveal likelihood of transformation to happen with a higher, let's say, success in a sense. Next slide. So 3 were the core hypotheses, which were quite straightforward that we tested, that the variable of attitude is positively related to intention, subjective norms are positively related to intention, that was the second, and the third one is that perceived behavior control is positively related to one's intention to transform their behavior. Next slide, please. So based on these, I'm showing 2 examples just to show you how this actually looks like when the output is there. So this is the results from the Ghana case study related to the gold mining. What this reveals is that practically, as you see with the little asterisks, we have the 2 hypotheses which were significant, meaning that attitude really relates positively with intention and perceived behavior control links positively with intention, while subjective norms still are relevant but not statistically significant. Next, please. So how this is linked to the variables that we have collected, practically what this indicates to us with the full extent of the results is that, for example, landscape degradation and erosion of the riverbank are determinants of people's attitude towards the gold mining activities. So these are were the 2 core variables which showed that influence people's attitudes towards whether they're positive about whether this should be transformed or not. Related to the perceived behavior control, which was also significant, the core, let's say, determinants of what people perceive as a possible space in which interventions could be facilitated towards a pro-environmental behavior was the need to really align policies, as there are many different ones which are not directly talking to each other, and that really was perceived as something that does not facilitate them to have an intention to change their behavior. At the same time, lack of training of the staff working on the field, but also the special planning component, which was considered as something that is crucial if behaviors need to change, meaning that without this happening properly, behavior cannot directly change. The variables in the middle relate to subjective norms, although they were not statistically significant within the model that we had, they still reveal that aspects like safety at work, health of the community, and food, impact on food availability, they do play an importance on the people's intention to really change their behaviors. Next, please. And what we could also test is how intention is described. So intention was really driven through rules of how I want my family to be in terms of well-being, if the equity within the community, but also respect in the traditions of the people in the case study of Ghana. Next, please. Yeah, so this was just to say that the 2 hypotheses on attitude and perceived behavior control were confirmed, although subjective norms not. And this is just a second example from the aquaculture part in Greece, just to show a different case in which, for instance, here we saw that only perceived behavior control was considered as a significant hypothesis in the end. could you do 2 times next? Yeah. So here what we could see is that, for instance, the perception of the lack of education or awareness of consumers on how my fish is being produced or distributed, if the packaging is really sustainable, the recycling of the waste that is produced during this process. These were considered and ranked quite high in terms of people's perception on that these were essential steps that they were suggested that need to be taken for their behavior to change. Otherwise, they thought that this does not really make sense without these happening. For the rest of the variables, although not statistically significant, we could still see that the impacts on the ecosystem were really determining people's attitude, and similarly with quality of air and water in the areas where aquaculture is happening. In terms of intention, there are 2 core determinants were really certification processes that need to become more organized or at least harmonized, because there was this perception that we are certification processes are becoming more and more, but in the end it's unclear whether this has an actual impact, as well as a long-term sustainability, that people really highlight that they don't need temporary solutions, but more like long-term investments for the future. Next, please. So this was just to give you an example of what we can see with such a kind of analysis. Next. And so what this implies for transformative change in our case. So structural equation models, they take a lot of time, I would say, to collect mostly data, to construct variables and to elaborate, but they allow us to indicate how each of the attributes of behavioral change can determine pathways to transformative change. We could also discover new variables that emerged in the process, which we had not initially planned, but they were revealed and highlighted by the participants, like trust to policies and to structures like certification schemes. And there was also a very strong emphasis by the participants, and this also showed in the total of the models, not just the ones that I showed today, that there was a very strong perception that workers' associations need to be better organized, and not everything can be expected from a top-down level for change to actually happen. Next, please. So as a very brief summary in the end, to achieve transformation for biodiversity, we do believe that it requires a deep understanding of perceptions of society and understanding what creates an intention to change. Intentions were there in all 4 case studies, that was certain. And what we could see is that there was highlighted in most of the cases a severe mistrust into regulations, not so much in the sense of transparency, but mostly in the sense of disconnect between how the policy is designed and the regulation to what happens on the ground and in real life, let's say. So there was a very clear need for policy to change as this perceived behavioral control factor. And there was a very large plea made to have organized bottom-up communities of practitioners through partnerships to make sure that personal values, relational values are safeguarded and well-being is achieved. Next. So just to say that the full detail of the methodology is shared within our GitLab page. All coding analysis was developed in R. There is a need for statistical skills to do this, but it's something that is quite feasible, I would say. But the core, let's say, difficulty of this approach was really the fact that it needs a lot of data. So and timing is important in this project. So this could limit usability, but if there's a very well-structured case, then it could work well. So that was it from me. Thank you. I'm not sure if there are any questions. So just to explain that no, nothing has been published yet, mostly in presentations we're working on, so hopefully we will have something on that soon. In terms of data and timing, so it takes a lot of time to collect the data mostly because you need to have workshops, you need to have interviews to talk to the participants, and there is a limitation on the structural equation model that you need to have more data entries than variables. But to generate the variables, you really need to ask a lot of questions. So there is a lot of back and forth, and this requires a lot of engagement from the stakeholders as well. And I would say that this is the most difficult part. So for us, it took, I would say, like 1.5 years in total, the whole data collection process. But I think it's a good investment of our time as well. Yeah, so to feed the model, you need more data entries in terms of answers compared more than the actual variables. That's the requirement, actually. So if, because I think I spoke more than I should have, so I will give directly the floor to our last but not least speaker, Anna Verhoeven. I hope I pronounce it correctly, from the MOSAIC project, who will close this session with her introduction on policy labs as cooperation models. And Anna, the floor is yours.
Thank you. I hope I can keep up a bit the energy for this in this last presentation. So thank you all for listening to the contribution I'm going to give. Prior, in fact, to starting really to tell you what we are doing MOSAIC, I would like you to ask yourself even the question, what if the science policy interface wasn't such a black box? Wouldn't you think that this, if it wasn't such a black box, that it could unlock a great source of transformative capacity? Next, please. Next. In fact, I assume that most of you currently in the room are researchers, really all doing hard work to produce knowledge that could help solve biodiversity or climate crisis. But how often do you feel that your research gets stuck somewhere in papers, or that it's struggling to make its way to real world policy? Valia just referred to how respondents indicated the disconnection between policy and what is actually happening on the ground. Well, this is a little bit more the focus about research and policy. So is there a connection or a disconnection? And policy workers, you who need timely, actionable evidence to make informed decisions, how often do you think that scientific knowledge is difficult to access, fragmented and not aligned with political realities? Next. And from both perspectives, how often do we think that science policy interface is slow, complex, and inaccessible? How often do we think that of those 7 projects here and all together in this webinar? So these questions are exactly the guiding questions for the contribution I'm, together with colleagues, making in MOSAIC Next. In MOSAIC, we introduce a specific method, Policy Labs Next, a method also for mapping systems interaction with a transformative capacity. A policy lab are a methodology that can help bridge, in fact, this gap between research and policy. They create structured yet flexible spaces where researchers and policymakers can interact in real time, co-develop solutions, and test policies in a controlled but real-life environment. So they are not just theoretical, but practical governance experiments that make biodiversity science, and in our case in MOSAIC, it's land use science, more policy ready, or vice versa, policy more evidence-based. So next. So in today's session, with a focus on mapping for systems interactions, I would like to take you a little bit in how policy labs can help us map and reshape the science policy system. So while life cycle assessments and the participatory system dynamics modeling analyze the environmental system, policy lab method helps us to map and reshape the governance system. Next. So here we are. No, previous. What's one too fast? In work that I'm not doing just myself, so my name is Anna Verhoeven. I'm from the Belgian, let's say, Flanders Research Institute for Agriculture, Fisheries and Food Research, together with my colleagues Carla Mignola and Jeroen de Wagemaker, but also with Hungarian colleagues Alexandra Cegledi and Boldisar Mingesi from the ESSRG, the Environmental Social Science Research Group. We are studying policy labs as an innovative cooperation modeling to co-produce actionable knowledge to support effective land use policies. A lot of words to say that we are studying it based on action research, because we are at the same time together with partners and case studies in the MOSAIC project, developing policy labs. Next. In the next 7 minutes, I will briefly focus again on this method, deepen it to guide you through what we think are essential building blocks, reflect from MOSAIC. We are now 1.5 years in this project. All policy labs have been established. And then I will end by giving you some reflections. Next, please. So why this method? It is a demanding method, but why would one choose to develop a policy lab? It is because we because innovation in the knowledge production system is argued in different, but especially in the work of Esther Turnhout, literature, and more specific, the need to improve the organization of the science policy interface, to co-create actionable knowledge and to amplify the impact of the knowledge production system. At the one hand, it's about actionable knowledge. At the other hand, it is also about reprioritization. It's taking into account societal and political values and priorities within our work as researchers. So there is a clear need for this kind of innovation. And in this, it's clear that a structured approach is needed. Because if we just interact, if we just use the current dialogues that are there, we are missing something, because the crisis, the environmental crisis, is still there. So in this aim to find more structured approaches, we develop policy labs, and we distinguish them as a distinct type of a living labs. So with policy innovation as a primary focus. Next. So for us, a policy lab is an interdisciplinary, transdisciplinary, collaborative space that brings together researchers, policymakers, and other stakeholders to develop evidence-based insights and co-design policy innovations. Next. I'll now briefly guide you through how we think, or what is essential to establish a policy lab. First of all, one needs to have a better understanding of what we call a window of opportunity. And a window of opportunity is where, at the one hand, you have the societal and the policy context comes together with, at the other hand, a research context. Next. And it is in there, in this overlap, that policy labs can act as a real catalyzer for transformative change. Next. because the aim of policy labs is to work towards policy innovation, to have a contribution from research towards policy innovation. And this aim is not new and it's not unique to MOSAIC, but I do think what I think is unique to MOSAIC Next is that in this project, we have quite reserved quite a budget to do this work, because we were convinced, and the coordinator with us, Vito, that this is not happening just by itself. It requires time, it requires dedicated methods, it requires training and learning. So next. So how to establish such a policy lab? What should we take into account? And we identified 6 core building blocks. Next, please. First is you need a core group that includes both the policy context perspective and what we call a policy lead, and on the other hand, a knowledge broker. It's about competences, and it's about bringing in those 2 contexts. And it's not just a researcher consulting a policy worker, or a policy worker consulting a knowledge worker. No, it's actually working together. So you need a dedicated time, and we dedicated budget for 2 roles, and you see different competences needed. I'm also referring here to the GRC work, where these role definitions are made visible in a very handy online tool. Next. A core group is one thing, that's the who, but then comes the major hard work prior to being able to dive into case studies. It's defining together this core focus. It's building a shared understanding of the topic and the challenges to be addressed. It is a systems thinking approach but it is really dialogue about identifying a core focus, and it's not predefined. You can't really fix it in a strict timeline. Sometimes it will be maybe more policy driven, that there is a momentum, an urgency, a reason why a specific topic gets higher on the priority list of research, but also can be research driven and also society driven. Next. Around those, I'm not going into detail, there is, of course, the policy mapping, stakeholder engagement, and building all together a work plan and messages. I do not have the time to go into more detail today, but it's very important that this core group works with key members towards a common understanding of those 6 building blocks, so that the evidence that will be produced will have impact towards policy innovation. Next. So in MOSAIC, we have 5 regional policy labs and 1 at the EU level. So by now, they all established a policy lab and are all defined a core focus, and different types of case study research are done in interaction with this policy lab. Next. Next. So, so what I wanted to indicate here is that, of course, it's not fixed building block ID. They interact with each other, and it's very important that to establish an iterative process of reconsidering and reformulating and more and aligning with the different components. Next. So 1 year and a few months, almost 1 year and a half into this project, as I told you, they are established. And just to give you a qualitative, by quotes, insight in some first findings, they are considered really as soils for fertile soils for research, but also as a kind of repair lab to repair this interface between society, science, and policy. and really as platforms also for connecting evidence with policymakers who are addressing pressing regional issues. So I think for now, although it is challenging to work in this platform, yet they are very promising. Next, please. So, oh, I thought there was another. Please go one back. I think they jumped. Oh, that's strange. So I added just. You can go to the next. To conclude, I just added, and I thought they were in. So going back to the first question, what if the science policy interface wasn't such a black box? Wouldn't that unlock a great source of transformative capacity? I would answer that policy labs are a method to map and act on the science policy interface, and they are promising to be a great source of transformative change. Thank you.
Fantastic, Anna. Thank you so much. Yeah, I see lots of hands here. So this is very interesting, and I think it is a very nice closure of the webinar topics, because it touches a topic which I think is always the most difficult to tackle, and thank you for being so brave with it. I don't see any questions on the chat. There's still time to ask. In the meantime, I will ask you a question based on your experience so far with it. Just quickly, so this is still ongoing, or is this a completed piece of work?
It's ongoing. We have almost 3 years and a half more to work on this. What is almost finalized is the first deliverable on how to establish. So it just submitted, it's in review on how to establish a policy lab. But we will work further at the one hand about the different competences needed, and to support policy labs in their work in doing so. And at the other hand, our learning on understanding the science policy interface and interactions, our knowledge on this. And so, we plan also a scientific paper on the definition of the science policy interface. So that's upcoming.
Perfect. No, that's great. Yeah, so the question I had about that is really because I think maybe for us as scientists is always very challenging engaging, like I said in my talk, engaging with stakeholders, but policy engagement is also quite challenged. So I was wondering if you have thought or planned of a specific strategy to really tackle policy in the sense of what levels of engagement do you expect in this participation? I mean, I guess that the more local, the easier, I don't know if it's the right term would be, but the higher that you go all the way to the EU, that would be a bit more challenging. So what is your plan about this?
2 elements in there. First of all, it's important to make the policy context and the policies more precise, or to make a selection. What policy or which policy instrument are you targeting? Do you have an awareness of the policies or policy instruments that really make a difference for your research topic? So that's the first question. If you have identified the policies or policy instruments that are core or key related to your core topic, then comes only the question of who is involved with those policies. Who are policy workers? And this is quite a broad term again, because it could be civil servants, but it could also be politicians. And then comes in the stakeholder analysis. So again, a very targeted stakeholder analysis, targeted towards policy interaction you want to have. So you do a targeted stakeholder analysis, and only then comes also a power interest approach matrix. You could do what is their interest and what is their power, and then you select. And then comes in the levels of engagement, and to make deliberate choices on who, when to activate and to engage. So it's not that in a policy lab setting that you make in the very beginning a choice and then it's all set. No, no, no. It's within this process. And in MOSAIC, we have a 4.5-year process. It will highly depend also. The different core focuses are, of course, related to EU policy, which is quite common. But when it comes to regional scale, there are in-between actors, policy worker actors, that we need to identify and to interact with. So it's a process, it's a deliberate process, and a good understanding of the targeted policies, the key policies, provide structural guidance to do a targeted stakeholder analysis and then to define strategies on how to engage.
Fantastic. I look for good luck, because it's going to be really hard work, but we look forward, I guess, to the results of this.
But there are two knowledge brokers in the room of MOSAIC. I think Boldi from Hungary and Francesca from Portugal are in the room. So I don't know if they want to add something. I welcome them.
Not sure. I don't see.
But thank you for giving us the opportunity.
No, thank you so much. And this is really interesting. And I think there is a lot of potential for future also exchanges. There is a question from Roxanne. Hi, Roxanne. What kind of activity do you carry at the European level, like the EU Living Lab? And she's mentioning that the BioAgora project might be interested in this.
So at the EU level, we are our policy workers or policy leads come from two umbrella organizations. One is ILO, European Landowners Organization, and the other Eurocide, the Nature Conservation Umbrella Organization. So because MOSAIC is about land use change, so we interact with them, we use their working groups as places to hold focus groups and interact with them, and they use their entrance to different platforms to go further in dialogue. So it's also the type of interactions, of course, are not the same, nor are the type of policy makers at the EU level, but the approach is similar enough to call it also a policy lab.
Fantastic. Thank you. Thank you so much for the clarification. Yeah.
On the website, what is already there is on the website, the different policy labs have a contribution and giving more specifications on how they are defined on the MOSAIC website.
Excellent. Thank you. I think we will provide, and Danai and Joanna are also going to help with that. We will provide all the recordings as well, the links to the different projects. Oh, someone did that already on the chat. So, but all information will be shared on the website as well. Okay, so thank you so much. We have a few minutes left to really give an overview. So our colleagues from White Research, they have provided a very short poll to get also your feedback about these with 3 questions. So it would be great if you can help us improve, because there will be future webinars on this series, and we would like to become better and better. So the first one, the questions are all on the chat, is about whether the webinar has increased your knowledge on the topic. That's the first one, and we are getting some responses. I see. So, okay. not very bad, I would say. But overall, as people are answering these, I would like to really thank everybody for their contributions. And I think there was a really nice circle because we started from the very nature-based approaches related to how we do our life cycle and input-output analysis to understand our footprints, and how from that we move to looking at things from a systems perspective view to understanding societal motives and reaching all the way to policy. So this is, I would say, very nice and complete series of topics. I could also see a lot of methodological synergies in there. So I hope we will have also more fruitful collaborations in that respect in the future. So the second question on the poll is, what is the key concept that stood out to you most from today's webinar? So it would be great if you can also let us know about that. Unfortunately, I cannot see those because I have not the right version of Teams on my device, but I hope our wide research colleagues will be able to summarize those outputs. And I'm not sure. Okay, we keep getting responses, so I can wait a bit more. But maybe in the meantime, we could also have the next slide with the upcoming events. So just to let everyone know that there is an upcoming conference, the alternate conference in Aveiro in Portugal, where we will be, the conference is in May. We will be hosting a session there related to pathways for transformative change for biodiversity. I guess that this is not surprising. This has been already shared and circulated through different networks. The deadline for submitting abstracts and contributing to the session is actually tomorrow. So in case we have any last minute opportunities to join, it would be really nice to continue and take our discussions to the Aveiro venue. And there is a third question on the chat on what could be improved in future webinars from our perspective in terms of content, pace of how many things we are saying, interactive features, visuals, or discussion time. So feedback is valuable because this is a dynamic process and it's done not for everybody's benefit. So we really appreciate all your contributions, thoughts, and input. So I'm not sure if there are other things. Yeah, I think that's the same. So from our part, I don't know if Danai or Joanna have more things to mention. Yeah, then the last point is that there's a third series of seminar, which will be around the month of June. The topic will be announced, I think, within the coming month. So it would be great to see you all there and to have such a good participation as we had today in such an engaged series of speakers and participants. Lastly, Danai has posted on the chat a link to our BIOTRAILS LAA platform, the Learning and Action Alliances, which allow everyone to join and discuss and get access to the discussions and the outcomes of our project, together with the projects that belong to our project cluster. The link is there. You can register for free, and I think that's it from our side. Joanna, do we need to add something which I might have forgotten?
No, I think you covered everything. Thank you so much for today's moderation, and the speakers, of course, for presenting their work, and the participants as well. I hope that this webinar was helpful and important to them, and see you all in the next one.
Thank you
so much.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.